What if the girl you loved as a child was never really human? What if every memory you had of her, every laugh, every whispered secret, every single moment was real, but she was something else entirely? Something ancient, something powerful, something the entire universe had been waiting for. This is not a fairy tale. This is not a dream. This is the story of Ethan Farev, a regular guy from a small town in England, a soldier, a man who fell in love before he even understood what love was. And the girl he loved? She came back, but she didn't come back as the girl he remembered. She came back wearing a crown. And behind that crown was a secret so massive, so world-changing, that governments tried to bury it. Entire alien civilizations tried to erase it. And the universe itself tried to keep them apart. Three things in this story will shock you. First, the girl Ethan loved as a child was not from Earth. She never was. Second, her return didn't just change his life. It changed the fate of two entire worlds. Third, the love they shared as children? It was the key. The one thing nobody expected. The one thing that saved everything. Nobody knew. Nobody planned it. Nobody believed it was possible. But it happened. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Ethan Farev was 7 years old when he first saw her. It was a Tuesday. He remembered that clearly because Tuesday was the worst day of the week at Millbrook Primary School in rural Yorkshire, England. Tuesday meant math. Tuesday meant sitting next to Daniel Briggs, who always smelled like cheese and never stopped talking. Tuesday meant 45 minutes of staring at numbers that meant absolutely nothing to a 7-year-old boy who only cared about two things. Football. And the woods behind his house. But that Tuesday was different. That Tuesday, a new girl walked into his classroom. She was small. Quiet. She had long dark hair that fell past her shoulders, and the most unusual eyes Ethan had ever seen. They weren't quite brown. They weren't quite green. They were something in between. Something that shifted slightly depending on where the light hit them. Like deep water on a cloudy day. The teacher introduced her. Her name was Lyra. Just Lyra. No last name given. The teacher moved on quickly, which Ethan thought was strange. He filed it away in the back of his mind the way kids do. Not important enough to ask about. Strange enough to remember. Lyra sat 2 rows in front of him. She didn't talk to anyone that day. She sat perfectly still during every lesson. She didn't fidget. She didn't pass notes. She didn't look out the window. She just sat there with her hands folded on the desk, listening to everything with a quiet, focused intensity that made her look much older than 7. At lunch, everyone ignored her. Kids do that sometimes. Not out of cruelty. Out of indifference. New kid energy fades fast when there's football to play and chips to eat. But Ethan noticed her sitting alone at the far end of the lunch table. She had a small container of food that didn't look like anything he recognized. She ate slowly and carefully, looking out the large cafeteria window at the gray Yorkshire sky. He didn't know why he walked over. He just did. He sat down across from her without asking. She looked at him. Those strange shifting eyes studied him for a moment. "You're staring," she said. Her accent was unusual. Clean. Like she had learned to speak English from a book rather than from people. "Sorry," Ethan said. Then he pointed at her food container. "What is that?" "Food," she said. "Yeah. But what kind?" She looked at it. "Something my mother makes. Does it taste good?" She thought about this seriously. Like it was a complex question. "It tastes correct," she finally said. Ethan didn't know what that meant. But he laughed anyway. And to his complete surprise, the corner of her mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. But almost. That was how it began. Over the next several weeks, Ethan made it his personal mission to get Lyra to actually smile. A full smile. Not just that almost smile she gave him at the lunch table. He told her terrible jokes. He showed her his football tricks. He once spent an entire recess attempting to teach her the rules of British Bulldog, which she found deeply confusing, but watched with that same focused attention she gave everything. She didn't smile for 4 weeks. Then one afternoon, walking home from school through the back path that wound past the edge of the woods, Ethan tripped over absolutely nothing. His own feet betrayed him completely. He went down hard, face first into a pile of dead leaves, and when he looked up with leaves stuck to his forehead and a muddy nose, he found Lyra looking down at him. She smiled. Not the almost smile. The real one. Full. Bright. Like a light had switched on inside her. It changed her entire face. Ethan thought, in that specific moment, that she was the most interesting person he had ever met in his entire 7 years of life. He told her that from the ground, leaves still on his face. She laughed. Actually laughed. And then she reached down and helped him up. After that, they were inseparable. For 2 years, Ethan and Lyra were best friends. The kind of best friends that only exist when you are young and the whole world is small enough to fit inside a single neighborhood. They explored the woods behind Ethan's house every afternoon. Lyra was fearless in a way that Ethan admired and occasionally found alarming. She would climb things she shouldn't climb. She would wade into streams in her school shoes. She would stand at the edge of high places and look down without flinching. But she was also careful. Thoughtful. She noticed things other kids didn't notice. She would stop mid-walk and point at something in the sky, a cloud formation, a strange bird, a pattern of light through the leaves, and describe it with words that seemed too big for a child. That cloud, she said once, pointing up at a massive anvil-shaped storm cloud building on the horizon, looks like the formation patterns we use to navigate the upper thermals. Ethan looked at her. The upper what? She blinked. Looked at him, then looked back at the cloud. I read a lot, she said. He believed her. Lyra read constantly. She always had a book. But her books were strange. Old-looking, with titles he couldn't read because they weren't in English. He asked her about them once and she told him they were in a language her grandmother had taught her. He accepted this completely, because at 9 years old, accepting things is easy. There were other small moments. Moments that, looking back, Ethan would describe as wrong. But not wrong in a frightening way. Wrong in the way a puzzle piece feels wrong when you hold it upside down. Like something that only needed to be turned slightly to make perfect sense. Lyra healed fast. Ethan noticed this after she scraped her arm badly on a fence one afternoon. It was a deep scrape, the kind that should have scabbed and scarred. By the next morning it was already half healed. By the following afternoon it was completely gone. Smooth skin. No mark at all. He mentioned it to her. She looked at her arm. Then at him. Then she said, very calmly, I heal quickly. My mother says it runs in the family. Ethan accepted this too. He was 9. Healing quickly seemed like a good thing. Their friendship grew deeper through that second year. It became something more than just kids playing in the woods. They talked about real things. About the future. About what they wanted to be. Ethan wanted to be a soldier. He had decided this firmly and without doubt. His grandfather had served. His father had served. The uniform was already decided in his mind. Lyra listened to this seriously. What do you want to be? He asked her. She was quiet for a long moment. They were sitting at the base of their favorite oak tree at the edge of the woods, the late afternoon light cutting golden through the branches above them. I don't know yet, she said. But I think I will have responsibilities. Big ones. That I can't avoid. Like what? She looked at him with those shifting eyes. And for just a moment, just one brief second, they didn't look brown-green at all. They looked pale blue, glowing almost. Like bioluminescent water in the dark, like keeping something very important safe. She said, then she blinked. And her eyes were normal again. And Ethan, being 9 years old and deeply uncomplicated about the world, just nodded and said, that sounds hard. It will be, she agreed. Then she smiled that full, bright smile. And neither of them spoke again until the sun finished setting. 3 weeks later, Lyra was gone. No warning, no goodbye. Her family's small rented house at the edge of the village sat empty overnight. No forwarding address. No explanation to the school. No note left for Ethan. Just gone. He went to the oak tree every day for a month. Sat at its base. Waited. She never came back. And Ethan Farev spent the next 18 years trying to forget a girl with eyes that glowed blue in the fading light. A girl who laughed like a light switching on. A girl who said she had responsibilities she couldn't avoid. He never forgot. Not even close. 18 years is a long time. Long enough to build a life. Long enough to bury things. Long enough to convince yourself that a childhood memory is just that. A memory. Soft around the edges. Maybe exaggerated. Maybe half imagined by a kid who read too many adventure books and spent too much time alone in the woods. Ethan tried all of this. It didn't work. But life moved forward anyway. The way it always does, whether you are ready or not. He finished school. He enlisted. He went through basic training at Catterick Garrison in North Yorkshire, not far from the village where he grew up. He was good at it, disciplined, focused. His instructors noted his unusual calm under pressure, his ability to read situations quickly, his instinct for protection, the way he naturally positioned himself between threats in his unit without being asked. He rose through the ranks steadily. By 28, he was a decorated field operative attached to a joint UK-US Special Operations Task Force, with a clearance level that required him to sign documents he was not allowed to describe to anyone, including his own family. He had seen things. Not Lyra-level things. Not yet. But things that had quietly expanded the walls of what he believed was possible. A recovered object in the Scottish Highlands that emitted no radiation but registered temperatures that should have been physically impossible. A recovered pilot. Human in appearance, but with a skeletal structure that didn't match any human anatomy on record, found in a field in rural Nebraska. A transmission intercepted over the North Atlantic that repeated a sequence of tones no known human or animal could produce. These were filed. Classified. Buried under enough paperwork to make them disappear from public knowledge forever. Ethan filed his reports. He followed his orders. He was professional. But in the quiet moments, late at night in base housing, or sitting in the back of a military transport at 30,000 feet, his mind drifted back to a girl who healed overnight and had eyes that glowed blue in the dark. He had never told anyone about Lyra. Not his unit. Not his commanding officers. Not the psychologist he was required to see annually as part of his clearance maintenance. He wasn't sure why. Partly because it sounded insane. Partly because it felt private in a way he couldn't explain. Like something that belonged only to him. Then, on a gray March morning in his 27th year, everything changed. The mission briefing was held in a secure facility outside of London. Underground. No phones. No recording devices. Ethan sat with 7 other operators around a brushed steel table. His commanding officer, a compact, unreadable woman named Colonel Vasquez, stood at the front of the room. She pulled up a satellite image on the screen behind her. It showed a structure. Not a building. Not exactly. It was circular. Massive. Located in a remote stretch of the Norwegian Arctic. Above the tree line, partially embedded in glacial rock. It had not been there 6 months ago. Thermal imaging showed it was warm inside. Significantly warmer than the surrounding environment. And around its exterior, at regular intervals, were markings. Symbols. Ethan stared at those symbols for a full 10 seconds before his brain processed what he was seeing. He had seen those symbols before. On the cover of a book. A strange old book with a title he couldn't read, held in the hands of a 9-year-old girl sitting under an oak tree in Yorkshire. He said nothing. His face gave nothing away. 20 years of training held. But his hands, flat on the table in front of him, went very still. Colonel Vasquez briefed them efficiently. The structure had appeared following a seismic event that didn't match any natural geological pattern. Local Norwegian authorities had been redirected. All air traffic over the region had been rerouted under a cover story about atmospheric testing. A small international team, UK, US, and 2 other nations she did not name, was being assembled for close assessment. Their objective: approach, assess, document, and under no circumstances engage with anything inside or around the structure until a full threat assessment was complete. And? If something comes out? One of the other operators asked. Vasquez looked at him steadily. Observe. Document. Do not engage. She paused. Then added, with an emphasis that made the room go quiet. Whatever you see in there, stay calm. Whatever you think you recognize, stay professional. This is a scientific and strategic assessment, not a combat operation. The way she said whatever you think you recognize sat with Ethan for the entire flight to Norway. Like she knew something she wasn't saying. The landing zone was 40 kilometers from the structure. They moved in on foot through a landscape that felt like the edge of the world. White. Silent. The kind of cold that didn't just chill you but pressed into you, like the air itself was pushing back. The Norwegian sky above them was a deep, impossible blue dot. As they got closer, the team began to notice things. The ground around the structure was different. Not frozen. The snow stopped in a perfect circle approximately 200 meters from the structure's outer wall. Inside that circle, the ground was dark earth, almost warm under their boots. The air smelled different, clean in a way that had nothing to do with the Arctic. Like ozone after lightning. Like rain before it falls. The symbols on the outer wall were larger than they had appeared in the satellite images. Each one was roughly 2 meters tall, carved or formed directly into the material of the wall itself. The material was not metal, not stone, not anything Ethan could identify. It was dark gray with a faint inner luminescence. Like something alive was pressing gently from the other side. The team set up a perimeter. Ethan stood closest to the wall. He reached out one gloved hand and pressed it against the surface. It was warm, and the moment his hand made contact, one of the symbols near his palm shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. Like a ripple on water. He pulled his hand back. Forev. Vasquez's voice in his earpiece. Calm. Step back from the wall. He stepped back. 20 seconds later, a section of the wall directly in front of him simply opened. No seam, no mechanism, no sound. It just moved apart. Like a curtain pulling back. Light spilled out. Pale blue. Warm. And from inside that light a figure stepped forward. Tall. Dark hair. Skin the color of deep water under moonlight. A crown. Not gold. Not silver, but dark metallic with blue gemstones that pulsed with their own quiet light, resting perfectly on her head. Dressed in dark royal armor that caught the Arctic light and turned it into something richer. She stopped 3 meters in front of him. Every member of the team had their hands on their weapons. She looked at them, without fear, without aggression, with that same focused, thoughtful stillness that Ethan had watched every day across a school cafeteria table when he was 9 years old. Then she looked directly at him. Those eyes. Not brown, not green, pale blue, glowing, gently, like bioluminescent water. Like light switching on. Ethan, she said. Her voice was the same. Exactly the same. Clean, careful. Like English learned from a book rather than from people. I told you I had responsibilities. His weapon was still holstered. His hands were completely still. You said they were big ones, he said. They are, she agreed. And then, behind her, inside the light of the structure, something vast and ancient and brilliant moved. And the Arctic sky above them opened, just slightly, in a way it was never supposed to. And through that gap came the beginning of something that would change every single thing the human race had ever believed about itself. Nobody on the team spoke for a full 30 seconds. 30 seconds is a long time when you are standing in the Arctic cold in front of a woman who just stepped out of a glowing alien structure and called your teammate by his childhood nickname. Colonel Vasquez recovered first. She always did. Stand down, she said quietly into the team comms. Weapons stay holstered. Nobody moves without my order. The team complied. Good operators. Well trained. But Ethan could see it in their body language, the slight stiffness, the controlled breathing. They were managing fear the way soldiers manage fear. By converting it into procedure. Lyra watched this without expression. Then she looked back at Ethan. You should introduce me to your commander, she said. Properly. It will help. Something about the calmness of that sentence, the sheer ordinary politeness of it, standing in the middle of an impossible situation, knocked something loose in Ethan's chest. He almost laughed. He didn't. Because Colonel Vasquez was standing 4 meters away, and this was technically still a classified first contact situation. Colonel Vasquez, he said, keeping his voice level. This is... Lyra. Vasquez studied her. Lyra what? Lyra tilted her head slightly. My full designation would take approximately 40 of your minutes to pronounce correctly. In your language, The closest translation of my title would be the sovereign heir of the Valdrin Continuum. She paused. Lyra is fine. Vasquez stared at her for a long moment. The Valdrin Continuum, she repeated. Yes. And what is that, exactly? A civilization, Lyra said simply. Considerably older than yours. We have existed in this galaxy for approximately 400,000 of your years. We have been aware of Earth for most of that time. The Arctic wind moved across the snow around them. And you've been watching us, Vasquez said. Not a question. Studying, Lyra corrected gently. There is a difference. Watching implies passive observation. Studying implies investment. We have been invested in your development for a very long time. Why? Lyra was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that made every single person standing in that circle of warm Arctic Earth go completely still. Because humanity is not an accident, she said. You were placed here, seated, by a faction within our civilization who believed that a younger species, given enough time and enough difficulty, would develop something that older civilizations had lost. She paused. Empathy. True, unconditioned empathy. The kind that survives pain. The kind that chooses connection even when separation is easier. No one spoke. They were right, she added. Mostly. Vasquez exhaled slowly. You said you're the sovereign heir. What does that mean? Lyra's expression shifted slightly. Something moved behind those pale glowing eyes. It means I am next in line to lead the Valdrin Continuum. All 7 inhabited systems. Approximately 400 billion souls. She said this with the same tone someone might use to describe a mildly complicated job description. It also means that I am the reason this structure is here. I came back specifically because the Continuum has reached a decision point regarding Earth, and the protocols of our civilization require that the sovereign heir initiate any first formal contact. Not delegates. Not ambassadors. The heir directly. She looked at Ethan again. There was also a personal reason, she said. Vasquez looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Lyra. The personal reason can wait, Vasquez said firmly. Let's start with the decision point. They moved inside. The interior of the structure was nothing like the outside. Where the exterior was dark and carved and ancient, the inside was open and luminous and vast in a way that shouldn't have been physically possible given the structure's outer dimensions. The ceiling was high and curved and emitted that steady pale blue light from every surface. The floor was smooth and slightly warm underfoot. Along the walls, screens, or what functioned as screens, displayed moving images, star maps, data streams, things that looked like biological readouts, and in the center, a circular platform where several other figures waited. Valdrin. Ethan studied them carefully. They were not all identical in appearance. Some had the blue skin and shifting eyes he recognized from Lyra. Others were darker, a deep indigo, almost violet. One was completely colorless, pale gray skin, white hair, eyes that were fully silver. All of them were tall. All of them stood with the same quiet stillness that Lyra had always carried. They watched the humans enter with expressions that were difficult to read. Not hostile, not warm, something in between. Like scientists at the moment before a significant result is confirmed. Lyra guided them to seats along the outer ring of the platform. Then she stood at the center and spoke, not to them, but to the other Valdrin present. In a language that sounded like water moving over stone and deep resonant tones below the range of comfortable hearing. The words vibrated slightly in Ethan's chest. Whatever she said, the other Valdrin responded with what appeared to be formal acknowledgement. Head inclinations. A gesture he didn't have a word for. Hands open, held outward, then slowly closed. Then she turned back to the humans. I have formally notified the delegation that contact has been initiated, she said. What we discuss here today will be recorded in Continuum historical record. You should understand the significance of that. We have first contact records going back 300,000 years. Yours will be one of them. Vasquez, to her enormous credit, simply nodded. Understood. What is the decision point you mentioned? Lyra sat down across from them. For the first time, she looked slightly less like a queen, and slightly more like the girl Ethan had known. There was something in the set of her shoulders. Something careful. Something that wasn't quite certain. There is a faction within the Continuum, she said slowly. that wants to accelerate Earth's integration into our broader civilization. Immediately. Full disclosure, full contact, full access to Valdrin technology and knowledge. She paused. On the surface this sounds generous, but it isn't. Vasquez said, it is not. Lyra confirmed. Civilizations that are integrated before they are ready do not survive it. Not as themselves. They adopt. They absorb. They lose the specific qualities that made them worth integrating in the first place. She looked around at the human faces watching her. The faction that wants immediate integration does not hate humanity. They simply do not understand what would be lost. And the other faction? Vasquez asked. Advocates for a protected development period. Continued observation. Gradual preparation. Perhaps 50 of your years. With limited guided contact beginning now. She met Vasquez's eyes. I am the deciding vote. As sovereign heir, the decision falls to me. And the decision must be made within 72 of your hours. The room was silent. Why 72 hours? Ethan asked. Lyra looked at him. Because the faction that wants immediate integration has already begun moving ships into your solar system. They are not violent. But they are impatient. And if I do not formally declare my position within 72 hours, they will interpret my silence as permission. She said this with complete calm, like she had been carrying this weight for a very long time. And Ethan, looking at her across the Valdrin platform, with the pale blue light making her crown glow, and her eyes shift, and everything impossible settling into the room like snow settling onto the ground, thought of a 9-year-old girl sitting under an oak tree saying, I think I will have responsibilities. Big ones. That I can't avoid. Yeah, he thought. You weren't wrong. 72 hours. 3 days to decide the future of 8 billion people. No pressure. Colonel Vasquez handled this the way she handled everything. By immediately requesting a secure communication line to her superiors, by establishing a protocol framework for continued interaction, and by calmly eating one of her ration bars while her team set up equipment around the perimeter of the Valdrin platform. Ethan handled it by finding Lyra. She was standing alone in a side chamber off the main platform. The room was smaller, quieter. The walls here displayed something different. Not data or star maps, but images. Long, slow panoramas of landscapes that were clearly not from Earth. Wide violet plains under triple star systems. Oceans that glowed at the surface like the water itself was alive. Cities that looked grown rather than built. Curved and organic, and lit from within. Lyra stood with her back to him, looking at one image in particular. A forest. Deep blue-green trees of impossible height. Light filtering down through canopies so thick it arrived in scattered beams, like cathedral windows. Like the woods behind his house in Yorkshire. He stood at the chamber entrance for a moment. You kept the forest image, he said. She turned. You remember. You used to describe places like that. When we were kids. I thought you were making them up. I was describing home, she said. Imperfectly. The language didn't have the right words. He walked into the chamber and stood beside her, looking at the image. Up close, the trees were extraordinary. The bark was almost black. The light between them was warm gold despite the blue canopy above. How long have you been the heir? He asked. I was born the heir, she said. My mother was the sovereign before me. Her mother before her. It is not elected, not appointed. It is inherited. But not by blood alone. She paused. By compatibility. Our succession works on resonance, a biological and cognitive alignment with the continuum's core frequency. Only certain individuals carry it. I was the firstborn with it in my generation. That's a lot to put on a child. Yes. No bitterness in it. Just acknowledgement. Is that why you were here? On Earth? As a kid? She was quiet for a moment. My mother sent me, she said. Part of my preparation involved immersive experience with developing civilizations, to understand them not as data, not as records and observations, but as lived reality. To sit with them, eat with them, walk with them. She glanced at him sideways. Fall in the leaves with them. You chose that one. It was the best memory I have of Earth, she said simply. He absorbed this. You knew the whole time. What you were. Yes, did you know what I was? A future soldier. Someone who'd end up standing in the Arctic staring at your front door? She turned to face him fully. No, she said. That was not anticipated. Something moved in her expression. When my mother recalled me, when I had to leave without saying goodbye, I was told it was necessary. That emotional attachments to subjects of study complicated the objectivity required for the heir's assessment. She paused. I was 10 years old and I did not handle it well. You didn't even leave a note. I know. She held his gaze. I am sorry, Ethan. I have been sorry for 18 years. The sincerity of it landed differently than he expected. Not like an apology from a queen. Like an apology from a friend. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. We'll table the childhood abandonment issues for now. He looked back at the forest image. Tell me about the factions. She breathed out. Return to the problem. The faction that wanted immediate integration. They called themselves the expansionists within continuum political terminology, had been arguing their case for approximately 60 Earth years. Their position had grown stronger as Earth's own technological development accelerated. The expansionists argued that humanity was approaching a critical self-destruction threshold, that without Valdran intervention, humans would destroy themselves. Through environmental collapse, through conflict, through the development of technologies they lacked the ethical framework to manage. They're not entirely wrong, Ethan said. No, Lyra agreed. They are not. But their solution removes the agency of the civilization being saved. And a civilization saved without agency becomes dependent. It stops growing in the direction that made it worth saving. The opposing faction, the preservationists, wanted a gradual approach. Monitored contact. Cultural and scientific exchanges introduced carefully over decades. Humanity allowed to find its own solutions with subtle, invisible guidance. The preservationists are also not entirely right, Lyra said. Their timeline may be too slow. The critical threshold the expansionists identify as real. 50 years of gradual contact may not be enough if the threshold arrives in 30. So neither faction has the complete answer. No. Which is why the decision belongs to the heir. What does your answer look like? Ethan asked. She was quiet for a long moment. I have been working on it for 7 years, she said. Since I was formally elevated to heir status. I have reviewed every integration in continuum history. Every success, every failure. I have identified the key variable that determines whether a civilization survives integration or is consumed by it. She looked at him with those steady glowing eyes. Do you want to know what it is? Obviously. The key variable, she said slowly, is whether the developing civilization is introduced to the broader universe through fear or through connection. She paused. Every civilization that was integrated after a threat, after being shown what they stood to lose, what power existed beyond them, what could destroy them, those civilizations adopted and merged and lost themselves within 3 generations. She held his gaze. But civilizations that were introduced through relationship, through genuine connection between individuals, through shared experience at the human level before the political level, those civilizations maintained their identity. They integrated without being consumed. The silence in the chamber was complete. You came back because of that, Ethan said slowly. The theory. You needed the contact to begin at the individual level. Yes. You needed to come back to someone who already knew you. Before the crown. Before the politics. Someone who knew Lyra before the sovereign heir. She didn't look away. You are the only human being who has ever known me, she said. The only one who chose my company not because of what I was, but because of who I was. She paused. That is rarer than you know, Ethan. Even among my own people. Outside the chamber, they could hear the sounds of the team setting up equipment. Vasquez's measured voice on comms. The ordinary mechanical sounds of humans doing human things in an extraordinary place. And in the quiet, 2 people who had last stood together under an oak tree in Yorkshire stood in an alien structure above the Arctic Circle, and the distance between 9 years old and 27 collapsed like it had never existed. 68 hours remaining. They found out about the ships at hour 47. Vasquez got the notification through secure channels. A message from a joint US-UK space monitoring station that tracked objects in the inner solar system. 6 objects had been detected. Large. Moving in slow, deliberate formation beyond the orbit of Mars. No signatures matching any known human or previously catalogued unidentified technology. She brought it to Lyra directly. Lyra looked at the data for exactly 4 seconds. The expansionist advance delegation, she said. They moved earlier than I anticipated. Something tightened in her jaw. They are applying pressure. 6 ships, Vasquez said. How large? Each one is approximately 4 kilometers in length, Lyra said. The room went very still. 4 kilometers, Vasquez repeated. Yes. Lyra looked up from the data. They are not weapons platforms. I want to be clear about that. The Valdren do not make war the way your civilizations do. Those ships are administrative vessels. Colony infrastructure. The kind we use to establish long-term presence in a new system. She paused. The expansionists are not threatening Earth. They are prepositioning for what they believe is the inevitable. They're assuming you'll vote their way, Ethan said. Or that I won't vote at all. She stood. Either way, the presence of those ships will create an outcome. If humans detect them through civilian channels, which will happen within 72 hours given your current detection technology, the resulting panic will accelerate the exact crisis the expansionists claim justifies their intervention. It becomes self-fulfilling. So we have less time than we thought, Vasquez said. We have approximately 30 hours before civilian detection becomes probable, Lyra confirmed. I need to make my formal declaration before then. Do you know what your declaration will be? Ethan asked. She looked at him. I know what I believe is right. I am not entirely certain the Continuum Council will accept it. Why not? Because what I intend to propose has never been done before. She laid it out over the next 3 hours, not to just Ethan and Vasquez now, but to the secure council that Vasquez had assembled, a small group of senior officials from the UK and US, joining via encrypted link from a location that Ethan was not told. Faces on screens. Careful eyes. People who had spent careers preparing for something they were never entirely sure would come. Lyra's proposal was this. Not immediate full integration. Not 50 years of gradual guided contact. Something new. A formal partnership framework, a term that translated roughly from Valdren as equal covenant, in which Earth and the Valdren Continuum would enter a documented, mutually consented agreement of co-development. Humans would be given access to Valdren knowledge on a pace determined by a joint council, half human representatives, half Valdren. Earth would be formally registered as a protected emerging civilization under Continuum law, which meant the expansionists could not act unilaterally. And in exchange, humanity would contribute something the Valdren had not possessed in over 50,000 years. What could we possibly contribute to a civilization 400,000 years old? One of the faces on screen asked. Lyra answered without hesitation. Novelty, she said. Genuine creative unpredictability. Your civilization generates new approaches to fundamental problems at a rate we have not seen in the continuum in recorded history. You solve things incorrectly and discover correct things by accident. You build things for wrong reasons that turn out to have right applications. This is extraordinarily rare. She paused. It is also, incidentally, why the expansionists want to integrate you immediately. They want access to that quality. But integration would destroy it. A civilization that knows all the answers stops asking questions. One of the faces on screen, an older man, American accent, the kind of voice that belonged to rooms where serious decisions were made, leaned forward. And the expansionist ships? If I formally declare the Equal Covenant framework, they must withdraw under Continuum law, Lyra said. They will not be pleased. There will be political challenge. This decision will be contested in the Continuum Council for decades. She said this with perfect steadiness. I expect it. And you're prepared for that fight? Vasquez asked. I have been preparing for it since I was 10 years old, Lyra said. Sitting under an oak tree in Yorkshire deciding what kind of leader I wanted to be. Something passed between her and Ethan across the room. Nobody else caught it. Too many screens, too much data, too much history pressing down on the moment. But he caught it. And she knew he caught it. The formal declaration took 3 more hours to prepare. Lyra worked with 2 of her senior Valdrin advisors, the colorless silver-eyed one whose name sounded like a held breath, and a younger female Valdrin with deep indigo skin who moved with a focused efficiency that reminded Ethan of a specialist on a good day. Ethan spent those 3 hours doing what soldiers do when there is nothing to do but wait. He checked his equipment. He walked the perimeter of the structure. He stood in the Arctic air and looked up at a sky that looked, from the outside, exactly the same as it always had. But it wasn't. Somewhere behind that blue, 6 4-kilometer ship sat in the dark and waited for a queen to make a choice. He thought about the sequence of events that had led him here. A Tuesday in Yorkshire. A girl who sat perfectly still and said food tastes correct. 20 years. A wall of symbols he recognized from a book he could never read. Glowing eyes in the Arctic light. He thought about what she had said in the side chamber. You are the only human being who has ever known me. And he thought about the word she had used for her proposal. Equal covenant. In Valdrin, she had explained, that term carried a specific implication. It was not a political term. It was a relational one. The equal covenant in Valdrin tradition was originally a personal concept, a bond between 2 individuals of equal standing who chose to face an uncertain future together rather than alone. It had never been applied to civilizations before. He stood in the Arctic dark and wondered if she knew exactly what she was doing, if she had chosen that specific term on purpose, if the thing she was proposing for humanity was, in some quiet way, also something she was proposing to him. He was 27 years old. He was a soldier. He was standing in the most important moment in human history. He went back inside. Lyra was standing at the center of the platform. Crown. Armor. Glowing eyes. Every inch a queen. She looked at him as he walked in. Ready? He said. Yes, she said. Are you? He thought about it for exactly 1 second. Yeah, he said. I've been ready since I was 9. She smiled. The full one. Bright. Like a light switching on. And then she began to speak, in the resonant layered language of the Valdrin, the declaration that would be recorded in 400,000 years of first contact history. 22 hours remaining. The declaration took 11 minutes to deliver. Ethan didn't understand a single word of it. But he stood behind Lyra's left shoulder, the position Vasquez had assigned him, which happened to be the traditional position of a personal guard in several human cultures, and, as one of the Valdrin advisors quietly noted, also happened to be the traditional position of a covenant witness in Valdrin custom, and he listened to every tone and resonance of it. The Valdrin delegation on the platform received it in silence. When she finished, the silver-eyed advisor, whose name, Ethan had learned, translated approximately to still water, spoke. Briefly. Formally. And then performed the open hand closing gesture that Ethan had now learned meant formal acknowledgement of a sovereign declaration. The other Valdrin followed, one by one. When the last one completed the gesture, Lyra turned to face the human representatives on the screens and the team in the room. The declaration has been accepted by the present delegation, she said. It will be transmitted to the full Continuum Council within the hour. The expansionist advance delegation has been formally notified and is legally required to begin withdrawal within 6 of your hours. She paused. It will take some of them considerably longer than that to accept what has happened here today. But they will comply. Continuum law is not optional. The older American voice from the screen spoke. And the equal covenant framework. When does that formally begin? Lyra considered this. It has already begun, she said. It began the moment the declaration was accepted. The first act of the framework is this meeting. This conversation. These words. She looked around the room. Humanity's first formally recorded conversation with an extraterrestrial civilization is already in the historical record. Everything that follows builds on this foundation. There were questions. Many of them. Vasquez managed the process with remarkable competence, moving through protocol and procedure and security clearances with the practiced focus of someone who had trained for exactly this kind of impossible scenario, even when she wasn't entirely sure it would ever be real. Ethan answered the questions directed at him. Yes, he had known Lyra as a child. No, he had not known her true identity. Yes, he had noted anomalous details but had no context to interpret them correctly at the time. Yes, his prior relationship had influenced his behavior during initial contact. No, he did not believe it had compromised the integrity of the mission. If anything, it had prevented what could have been a catastrophic misread of a peaceful approach as a hostile one. Vasquez did not disagree with this assessment. After the formal session ended and the screen connections were closed, and after the Valdrin delegation had moved to their own quarters within the structure to begin the transmission process, and after Vasquez had taken her team through a full debrief that lasted 2.5 hours, Ethan found himself alone again. He walked back to the side chamber with the forest images. Lyra was already there. She had removed the crown. She held it in both hands, looking at it. Without it, in the quieter light of the side chamber, she looked younger. Not 9 years old young, but the version of herself that existed before all the weight of the last several hours. She looked up when he entered. "How are you doing?" he asked, which was, given the context, probably the most absurdly ordinary question anyone had asked in the building that day. She smiled slightly. "I am recalibrating," she said. "Is that the Valdrin version of taking a breath?" "Approximately." She looked back at the crown. "In my culture, when a declaration is made, the heir is expected to spend 1 full day in ceremonial solitude. Reflecting on the weight of the choice, she set the crown carefully on a small ledge beside her. "I find I would prefer company." He sat down across from her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Outside, through the walls of the structure, the Arctic wind continued. The sky continued. The world continued, exactly as it had before, with no idea yet that anything had changed. But everything had changed. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. "Yes, the equal covenant. The term you used." He looked at her steadily. "You knew what that meant in Valdrin tradition. The personal dimension of it." She met his eyes. "Yes." "Was that deliberate?" A long pause. The pale blue light moved gently around the room. "In Valdrin tradition," she said carefully, "a sovereign's formal declaration carries the full weight of her meaning. Every word chosen precisely. Every term selected with full awareness of its implications." She held his gaze. "So yes, it was deliberate." He absorbed this. Outside, the universe sat quietly and waited. "I'm still pretty annoyed you didn't leave a note," he said. She laughed. The real laugh. The one he remembered. And in the side chamber of an alien structure above the Arctic Circle with 400,000 years of Valdrin history recording everything, Ethan Farev watched Lyra laugh and felt exactly like a 9-year-old boy watching a girl's face light up for the first time. "I know," she said, when she had recovered. "I am sorry. Genuinely. I know you are." He was quiet for a moment. "What happens now? Practically." "For you," she considered. "I return to the Continuum to formally present the declaration to the full council. There will be political challenge from the expansionist faction. Significant challenge. It will be a difficult period." She was quiet for a moment. "After that, I begin the work of building the joint council. Finding the right human representatives. Establishing the framework in practice, not just in principle. That will take years." "Many years," she agreed. "And Earth? Humanity? We just know now that we're not alone?" "That process will be managed carefully," she said. "Disclosure will be gradual, prepared. The joint council will guide the timeline." She looked at him. "It will not be fast. And it will not be easy. But it will be honest. No more buried reports. No more classified objects and redirected pilots." She held his gaze. "The truth belongs to humanity. I believe that." He nodded slowly. "Then, will you come back?" She looked at him with those pale blue eyes that he had been trying to forget for 18 years. "Equal covenant," she said quietly. "That is not a term we use lightly." He understood. "Okay," he said. She reached across the small space between them and picked up the crown from the ledge. She held it for a moment. Then she set it back down. You know what the strangest part of this is? She said. There are so many options. She smiled. The strangest part is that my mother sent me to Earth to understand humanity, to learn what made your species worth protecting, and I found it in the first week. She looked at him, a 7-year-old boy who sat down next to a strange girl eating lunch alone. Not because he was told to, not because he expected anything, just because it seemed like the right thing to do. Ethan was quiet for a moment. To be fair, he said, I was mostly curious about your food. She laughed again, and in that laugh was every year between then and now, and every mile between Yorkshire and the Arctic and the Valdron Continuum, and every impossible thing that love manages to build when the universe isn't paying attention. Outside, the 6 ships beyond Mars began to move, back the way they came. Slowly, formally, complying with a law that a 10-year-old girl had decided to honor even when it cost her everything. The Arctic sky held its blue. And somewhere under the ground, in the warm light of an alien structure, 2 people who had found each other twice sat in a quiet room and let the universe rearrange itself around them. Here is the part nobody tells you. The part that makes this story more than a love story, more than a first contact story, more than a political thriller set in the Arctic. Ethan Farev was not a coincidence. Years later, when the Joint Council had been established and the first careful disclosures had begun, and Lyra was deep in the work of building something that had never existed before, she released a portion of the Valdron observational records to the Joint Historical Archive. And buried in those records, in 70 years of careful Earth observation, was a note, written by her mother, the previous sovereign. It read, "The immersive preparation will take place in England, Yorkshire region. A small community. She will attend a human educational institution. We have identified one individual in the community whose cognitive and empathic profile is exceptional. A child who demonstrates precisely the qualities that make this civilization worth protecting. She will encounter him naturally. We will not interfere. Whatever connection forms will be genuine. We will observe." Lyra had never been shown that note. Her mother had never told her. She had sat down at that lunch table because of a choice she made herself. He had walked over because of a choice he made himself. And the note had said, "Whatever connection forms will be genuine." It was. It always had been. 2 children. An oak tree. A girl with eyes that glowed blue in the fading light. A boy who fell in leaves and made her laugh for the first time. And from that small, ordinary, unstoppable thing, a friendship, a memory, a girl who came back wearing a crown, the future of 2 civilizations turned. Not because of power. Not because of technology. Not because of ships 4 kilometers long sitting beyond Mars. Because of one boy who sat down next to someone who was eating alone. That is the thing the universe got right, even when it was trying to be complicated. Love is the oldest first contact there is, and now you know the rest of the story. If this opened your eyes to what ordinary moments can build into extraordinary history, stay right here. Let's take a moment and think about everything we just walked through together. A boy from Yorkshire who noticed a girl that nobody else saw. An alien heir sent to understand humanity, and finding it in a school cafeteria. 18 years of silence, a crown in the Arctic light, and a decision that changed the fate of everything, made not from power, not from fear, but from a childhood memory of being chosen. That is what this story is. But it is also something more. Because the truth at the center of this story, the thing Lyra understood that the expansionists never could, is that you cannot save something by taking away its ability to choose. You cannot protect something by removing its voice. And you cannot connect with something by overwhelming it with everything you are before it knows who you are. Connection starts small. It starts with sitting down. It starts with curiosity. It starts with a terrible joke and a full, bright laugh. It starts the way everything real starts. Quietly. Without announcement. In the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. The second thing this story shows us is that preparation and destiny are not opposites. Lyra was born to lead. She was trained for it. She was prepared for it from childhood. And none of that made her choices less her own. None of that made the love less real. The path is not the chain. You can be made for something and still choose it freely. And the third thing, the thing that I want you to carry out of this story, is the idea that the small, unseen moments of genuine human decency are not small at all. A 7-year-old walking across a cafeteria, a hand reaching down to help someone up from the leaves. Those moments compound. They build. They echo forward in ways you cannot see from where you are standing. You do not know which act of kindness is the one that changes everything. So you do all of them. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments below, I want you to answer this question. If you had been in Ethan's position, standing in the Arctic, watching a girl from your childhood step out of an alien structure wearing a crown, what would your first words to her have been? Drop your answer below. I read every single comment. Some of the best ones I'll feature in a future video. And if this story hit something in you, if you felt the pull of it, the weight of it, the strange and beautiful logic of it, then this channel is exactly where you need to be. Every week we bring you stories like this one, Hefi science fiction, human resilience, love that survives impossible distances, civilizations that rise because of the best things about people, not the worst. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. And if you want to go deeper, if you want full story archives, early access to new scripts, and behind the scenes on how these stories are built, the link to join our community is in the description below. The next video is already being written, and I promise you, it picks up where this one leaves off, in a way you will not see coming. Stay curious, stay connected, and remember, the childhood love nobody knew would become royalty was never really a secret. It was always there, waiting for someone to sit down and notice. See you in the next one.